Hello, my name is Jensyn McCain, and I chose hemlock, or more specifically, poison hemlock, or Conia maculatum, for my research paper on toxins. I also looked at water hemlock a little bit, but I'll get into that later in the slideshow. So to start off, I wanted to go over the origin. So hemlock comes from the Greek word konus, which means to whirl about. This comes from the symptom of convulsions or trembling that is caused by the poison in hemlock. It's an indigenous plant of Europe, Asia, and the United States. In the United States, it's most seen in the Midwest, West Coast. It's not seen in states like Alaska or Florida, Hawaii. Those aren't ideal growing locations for this plant. It used to be used as a cure for ulcers in the 1760s. It was also seen as a treatment for herpes, urosepsis, and breast tumors. It is not often used for these things anymore, just because it's hard to get the dosage right between the line of toxicity. So it's not used as much for this anymore, but it's still used for some treatments. And it's made up of 8 alkaloids that contribute to this toxicity, which I will go over later in the slideshow. And every part of this plant is toxic, but lethal doses vary on species ingesting it and the part of the plant that is ingested. From the seeds to the stem to the stalk, all of it is toxic. The flowers, the leaves, it's all toxic. So the structure and growth. Poison hemlock is a biennial plant, which means that it takes 2 years to grow. The first year of development is a vegetative growth phase. Usually only gets about 45 centimeters in height, and the flowers don't sprout. The second year is characterized by the white blooms gathered in umbels, which you can see in this picture right here. They're little umbrella type flowers. They're white and they are very pretty, but also very poisonous. It grows best in modified soils and under structures since the growth starts in midwinter. Symptoms. So it is very easily comparable to nicotine poisoning. All the symptoms pretty much align, which makes it very easy to spot for medical professionals. So some of the symptoms include nervousness, problems with limb movement, dilation of pupils, weak pulse, which will rapidly pick up after intoxication sets in, decreased body temperature, rapid respiration, tremors and convulsions, which is where the conus Greek word came from, respiratory distress, and asphyxia. Usually the common causes of death by this toxic plant is respiratory distress and asphyxia. Many of the death count is caused by asphyxia. So there are 8 alkaloids that make up this toxic plant, and they are conicine, conine, N-methylconine, conhydrine, pseudoconhydrine, conhydronon, N-methyl pseudoconhydrine, and 2-methylpiperidine. So you can see the structures of them, the chemical structures right here. They're all a 6-membered ring, and they all contain nitrogen. And almost all of them contain a propyl group on the side chain. And this contributes to the toxicity of them. In order for the molecule to have toxicity, it needs to have a propyl group or larger attached to the carbon chain, which you can see in almost every one of these except 2-methylpiperidine down here. Conicine and conine are the main alkaloids responsible for the high concentration of poison within this plant. Usually when they're taking autopsies, whether that be of cattle or of human death, these are the 2 alkaloids that are in the highest concentration. They make up about 75% of the toxicity within the plant. And in experiments, when they took out these 2, which are these 2 up top here, the toxicity was extremely low in comparison to when these 2 were present. So that just shows how toxic these 2 alkaloids are. So this plant does cause both acute and chronic toxicity. So the acute toxicity is characterized by muscular weakness, incoordination, trembling, mydriasis, excessive salivation, cyanotic membranes, and cold limbs. Any ingestion of the toxin may develop into these symptoms. So any ingestion of any parts of the plant, the seeds, the leaves, the flowers, the stalk, will result in acute toxicity. It does depend upon body weight and other factors. There's even temperature can even change the toxicity of a certain part of the plant. But acute toxicity is relatively always going to be present when you ingest this plant. Chronic toxicity, however, is characterized by symptoms of malformations such as pallidophysis, scoliosis, and torticollis, and it can even cause a miscarriage in pregnancy. In mammals, this chronic toxicity is only present in pregnancy. It is characterized by the malformations of a pregnancy through the toxicity of it. And then they also call it teratogenicity, which is causing developmental malformations in pregnancies. So something I thought was very interesting was that the most notable death by hemlock poisoning was Socrates, the Greek philosopher. He was sentenced to death by poison hemlock in 399 BC, and they mixed it with opium for his impiousness, which I thought was cool. Not cool, but interesting. And Socrates, as he was, dying of this plant, described the symptoms as a rapid loss of power of the lower extremities, muscular weakness, ataxia, staggering and trembling. Then there was loss of control of the upper extremities, and following came total paralysis. Nearing the end, there was a loss of power to chew, loss of sensation in the pupils, and finally death due to struggling with respiration and asphyxia. There's not that many deaths today. The statistic I saw was that there has been maybe less than 100 deaths in the past 100 years. And that's mainly due to the asymptomatic treatment that we had come up with. There's just hardly any room for error in treatment of this plant in humans, but there are a ton of livestock and cattle killed by this toxic plant every day. And I'll get more into that later, but it does affect farmers and agriculture way more than it affects us. So poison hemlock versus water hemlock. So there's many different types of hemlock. These are the two poison ones that I looked into. So the poison hemlock, or the Conia maculatum, versus the water hemlock, which is the Cicuta species. The poison hemlock has a taproot versus the water hemlock, which has a branch root system. The poison hemlock has these brown, red, purple spots on the stalk, which are very easily identifiable, compared to the water hemlock, which does not have any spots. And then the poison hemlock has a really mousy, gross odor to it, and the water hemlock does not have an odor. And then the poison hemlock grows near fences, under trees, and pastures, just out in the open, compared to the water hemlock, which, per the name, grows near water. It grows on banks of ponds or near any body of water. The poison hemlock's main toxins, like I was saying earlier with the alkaloids, are conine and conicine, compared to the water hemlock, which is described as a cicutotoxin and an alcohol cicutol. And then the molecular formulas, which you see there, are for the main toxins of this group. So the Cicuta species is divided into 4 species. You got the Cicuta bulbifera, the Cicuta douglasii, the Cicuta maculata, and the Cicuta virosa. I didn't really research into the difference between these 4 species because I was mainly looking at the poison hemlock, the Conia maculatum, but I did think it was very interesting that these were so close in relative size and stature, and just how they looked and how people often confuse them, even with such different visible markers. And like I said, visibly different from that of poison hemlock, but easily mistaken, since the flowers, which you can see right here, really, if you remember the picture that I showed earlier, look almost exactly like the Conia maculatum, the poison hemlock. But here's the branched root system. They even have kind of different leaves. These leaves tend to be more rounded on the water hemlock compared to the poison hemlock, which are more pointed. And then here's the little seeds. So the economic impact of poison hemlock is way more extreme than I thought it would be. So the poisonous plant amounts for about $100 million in livestock losses in the United States annually. So that means every year we lose about 100 million in livestock, which I thought was crazy. I did not realize, but I thought it was really cool as someone going into veterinary medicine, to see like what affects us the most, especially in Oklahoma, as a very farming agricultural state. There have not been any human deaths in years, like I was saying, but cattle and other animal livestock are killed by this toxin daily. It is nearly impossible to eradicate the plant from a large grazing pasture. Right now, they don't really have a herbicide that can take care of it. The main method is hand pulling each stem out of the ground, getting the taproot and all. And that's just unrealistic for a farmer with hundreds of acres tending to. So that's almost unheard of that it's going to be eradicated from any land. Other killers of this plant are ring spot virus, carrot thin leaf virus, alfalfa mosaic virus, or celery mosaic virus, but they have not proven fruitful enough in their methods. So really we just have to find, I guess, a better way to get rid of this poisonous plant. But other than that, these are my references for my paper. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I am so excited to see the rest of you guys' presentations. Thank you.